In this lesson, we're going to discuss access control vestibules. Now, one of the most effective physical security measures used by large organizations is the use of an access control vestibule. Now, an access control vestibule is a double door system that's designed with two doors that are electronically controlled to ensure that only one door can be opened at a given time. This configuration prevents unauthorized entry while simultaneously providing a controlled space to validate the person's identity or credentials before granting them access to the organization's larger parts of the facility. Now, often, these access control vestibules are combined with other measures like access badges and security personnel to create a more comprehensive security framework. So let's take a look at how access control vestibules work as the first line of physical defenses against those who are trying to get into our organization's buildings. Now, whenever a person approaches your facilities, they're first going to enter the outer door of the access control vestibule. This door will then lock behind them to essentially trap them inside of this intermediate space between the untrusted area contained outside of our secure facilities and the inner trusted area that contains all of our sensitive data and systems that we want to protect. Now, before they can open the inner door and access the sensitive area, our identity or credentials must be verified. This verification, once successful, will then let the inner door open and grant them access to the secured area. If the verification is not successful, that person will remain stuck inside the vestibule until the organization's security personnel intervene and decide to either let them in or make them turn around, back out the outer door, and leave the facility. Access control vestibules provide us with a controlled environment where anybody who's trying to gain access to our organization's facilities can be screened, identified, and verified prior to being authorized to access our secure spaces inside of our buildings. Now, these access control vestibules can also help us to prevent piggybacking and tailgating. Piggybacking typically involves two people working together with one person who has legitimate access intentionally allowing another person who doesn't have proper authorization to enter a secure area to be able to go in with them. Often, piggybacking occurs because the attacker convinces an authorized employee to let them in by using some kind of social engineering or manipulation technique. For example, when I used to work as a penetration tester, I would often dress up as a delivery driver and approach an access control vestibule with several boxes in my hands and ask some unsuspecting employee to swipe their access badge so I can enter through the access control vestibule even though I wasn't authorized to do so. Now, you'd be amazed at how often this simple version of social engineering and impersonation worked for me time and time again. If I had to quantify it, I would say that I was successful about 50% of the time, which is pretty good. Now, tailgating, on the other hand, is much more covert in nature. Tailgating occurs whenever an unauthorized person closely follows somebody through the access control vestibule who has legitimate access into that secure space without their knowledge or consent. For example, if you work in a secure office building that uses turnstiles as a form of access control vestibules, it would be pretty easy for me to sneak through the turnstile right after you swiped your access card to unlock that turnstile even without you knowing it. Now, many people get these two terms confused because they both refer to unauthorized entry, but there is a distinction between them. Piggybacking is usually going to involve authorized individuals allowing an attacker into a facility through complicity or some form of negligence. Tailgating, on the other hand, is a much more opportunistic type of attack that's used to gain access to the secured area by following an authorized individual through the access control vestibule without their knowledge or consent. Luckily, the use of access control vestibules instead of a standard locked door can really help us to prevent piggybacking and tailgating too, because a lot of times these access control vestibules are only large enough for a single person to walk through, and therefore you can't piggyback or tailgate because there's simply not enough room. Now, you may have heard me mention that authorized personnel will usually have an access badge as a form of identification and verification as they're passing through a checkpoint like an access control vestibule. Now, most access badges are designed to act as an individual's key to unlock doors, systems, or access control vestibules to gain access to a protected or secured space. These access badges are often equipped with embedded technologies like RFID or radio frequency identification, NFC or near field communication, or the older legacy magnetic strips like you have on the back of your credit card in order to communicate with badge readers to authenticate the holder's identity and validate them as having the right access privileges for that specific area. Access badges work by having an employee present their access badge to a reader by sliding it through the magnetic reader or holding it close to the reader if you're using RFID or NFC-enabled access badges. These badges will provide detailed information about the person so the system can cross-reference their identity with a centralized database. If the access badge holder has the appropriate permissions for that given area or system, they will then be granted access. If they're not authorized, they'll be denied access or an alert will be sent to a security guard for further remediation. Usually, access badge access is a swift process that only takes a few seconds per individual walking through one of these checkpoints. Now, the great thing about access badges is that they can be programmed to grant different levels of access based on the individual's role within the organization. For example, I used to work at the National Security Agency, and we use access badges on nearly every office door to prevent unauthorized people from accessing different offices. Even though a person might have a top secret clearance to access the entire building, going through that access control vestibule in the lobby, many of the individual offices had a separate access badge reader to provide a second level of verification for each office. For example, I worked in the cyber defense area, and I was granted access to those offices, but since I wasn't hired as a translator, I couldn't access the foreign language translation offices because my badge didn't have those access rights. Also, every time you use your access badge to pass through a checkpoint or access control vestibule, this action is going to be logged. This logging of your access creates a nice audit trail that can be reviewed if a security breach or other concern is raised. Now, technology does play a significant role in modern security systems, but this human element cannot be understated. Most access control vestibules are set up at the entrance to the building, and they'll also have security guards stationed there at the front desk or at access control points to provide us with a visual deterrent, verification assistance, and an immediate response capability, if required, at those access control vestibules. Now, security guards do serve as a great visual deterrent because their mere presence can deter potential threats. These security guards also provide assistance with verification of your identity, especially if your electronic badging system fails or goes offline for some reason. Also, if a visitor arrives to your building, they're not going to have their own access badge, so that security guard can follow the procedures for checking the visitor's identity and granting them limited access to the building with a temporary badge per your organizational policies. Finally, our security guards also provide us with an immediate response capability in case a security breach is going to occur. In these cases, the security guards can provide an immediate response to determine whether they need to confront the intruder or initiate their emergency response protocols. So remember, an access control vestibule is a double door system that is designed with two doors that are electronically controlled to ensure that only one door can be opened at a given time. These access control vestibules are usually integrated with electronic badges and operated by security guards at the entrance to your secure facility or office building. These access control vestibules, access badges, and security guards create a multi-layered approach to increasing our physical security. Each component complements the other ones to ensure the potential vulnerabilities are going to be minimized. As threats continue to evolve, it's essential to understand how these access control vestibule systems work and continually refine them to ensure that our facilities remain secure and accessible only to those with the correct access permissions.